Jeff Lynne is an English songwriter, composer, arranger, singer, multi-instrumentalist and record producer who gained fame as the leader and sole constant member of Electric Light Orchestra. He was later a co-founder and member of the supergroup Traveling Wilburys together with George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Roy Orbison and Tom Petty. Lynne has produced recordings for artists such as the Beatles, Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, Brian Wilson, Randy Newman, Roy Orbison, Dave Edmunds, Shannon and Tom Petty. He has co-written songs with Petty and also with Harrison, whose solo albums Crowd 9 and Brainwashed Lynne co-produced. Among the many compositions to his credit are such well-known hits as Livin Thing, Evil Woman, Turn to Stone, Do Ya, Strange Magic, Sweet Talkin Woman, Telephone Line, Mr. Blue Sky, Hold On Tight, Don't Bring Me Down, This Is Love, I Won't Back Down, Free Fallin', Handle With Care, and End of the Line. In 2008, The Washington Times named Lynne the fourth greatest record producer in music history. In 2014 he received a star on the Birmingham Walk of Stars in his hometown. Musical career, early life and career. Lynne grew up in the Shard End area of Birmingham, West Midlands, where he attended Alderley Boys Secondary School. His first guitar, an acoustic instrument, was bought for him by his father, for £2. He was still playing it in 2012. In 1963 he formed a group with Robert Reeder and David Walsh using little more than Spanish guitars and cheap electrical instruments to produce music. They were originally named the Rockin' Hellcats before changing to the Handicaps, and finally to the Handicaps. They practiced at Shard End Community Centre and performed weekly. However, in 1964, Robert Reeder and David Walsh left the band and Lynne brought in replacements. At the end of 1964, Lynne decided to leave the band to replace Mick Adkins of the local band The Chads. Sometime in or after 1965, he acquired his first item of studio recording equipment, a Bang & Olufsen Bearcord 2000 Deluxe stereo reel-to-reel tape recorder, which allowed multi-tracking between left and right channels. He says it taught me how to be a producer. In 1966, Lynne joined the lineup of the Night Riders as guitarist. The band would soon change their name to the Idol Race, a name allegedly given to them sarcastically by his grandmother Evelyn Lynne, who probably disapproved of pop music as not being a proper job. Despite recording two critically acclaimed albums with the band and producing the second, success eluded him. In 1970, Lynne accepted an offer from friend Roy Wood to join the lineup of the more successful band The Move, 1970-86, the Electric Light Orchestra. Lynne contributed many songs to The Move's last two albums while formulating, with Roy Wood and Bev Bevan, a band built around a fusion of rock and classical music, with the original idea of both bands existing in tandem. This project would eventually become the highly successful Electric Light Orchestra. Problems led to Wood's departure in 1972, after the band's eponymous first album, leaving Lynne as the band's dominant creative force. Thereafter followed a succession of band personnel changes and increasingly popular albums, 1973's ELO2 and On the Third Day, 1974's Eldorado and 1975's Face the Music. By 1976's A New World Record, Lynne had almost developed the roots of the group into a more complex and unique pop-rock sound mixed with studio strings, layered vocals, and tight, catchy pop singles. Lynne's now almost complete creative dominance as producer, songwriter, arranger, lead singer and guitarist could make ELO appear to be an almost solo effort. However, the ELO sound and the focus of Lynne's writing was also shaped by Louis Clark's and Richard Tandy's co-arranging, under Lynne's direction, Bev Bevan's drumming, and Richard Tandy's integration of the Moog, harmonium, and mellotron, with more novel keyboard technology, gave Lynne's songs a more symphonic sound. The pinnacle of ELO's chart success and worldwide popularity was the expansive 1977 double album Out of the Blue, which was largely conceived in a Swiss chalet during a 2-week writing marathon. The band's 1978 world tour featured an elaborate spaceship set and laser light show. In order to recreate the complex instrumental textures of their albums, the band used pre-recorded supplemental backing tracks in live performances. Although that practice has now become commonplace, it caused considerable derision in the press of the time. Lynne has often stated that he prefers the creative environment of the studio to the rigors and tedium of touring. In 1979, Lynne followed up the success of Out of the Blue with Discovery, which held #1 in the UK for 5 weeks. The album is primarily associated with its 2 disco-flavoured singles and with the title's wordplay on disco, and very. However, the remaining 7 non-disco tracks on the album reflected Lynne's range as a pop-rock songwriter, including a heavy, mid-tempo rock anthem that, despite its use of a drum loop, could be considered the antithesis of disco. In an April 2008 interview, Lynne fondly recalled his forays into dance music. "I love the force of disco. I love the freedom it gave me to make different rhythms across it. I enjoyed that really steady driving beat. Just steady as a rock. Euro unregistered trademark. They always liked that simplicity in the bass drum." In 1979, Lynne rejected an offer for ELO to headline an Edmunds concert in the UK, allowing Led Zeppelin to headline instead. In the absence of any touring to support Discovery, Lynne had time to contribute 5 tracks to the soundtrack for the 1980 film musical Xonad. The score yielded 3 top 40 singles, I'm Alive, All Over the World, and the title track Xonad, which reached #1 in the UK. Nevertheless, Lynne was not integrated into the development of the film, and his material subsequently had only superficial attachment to the plot. Xonad performed weakly at the box office. Lynne subsequently disavowed his limited contribution to the project, although he later re-recorded the title song for the 2000 box set Flashback. In 2007, the film was loosely adapted into a successful Broadway musical, incorporating almost all of the songs from the original film, and also using 2 other ELO hits, Strange Magic, and Evil Woman. 1980s. In 1981, Lynne took the band in a somewhat different direction with the science fiction-themed album Time, reaching #1 for 2 weeks in the UK, producing the second top 3 single in less than 2 years. The strings were still featured, but with heavily synthesized textures. Following a marginally successful tour, Lynne kept this general approach with 1983's Secret Messages and a final contractually obligated ELO album Balance of Power in 1986. Lynne discusses the contractually obligated nature of the final albums on a short interview included with a Zoom DVD. ELO now had only 3 remaining official members, and Lynne began devoting more time to producing. During his time in the Electric Light Orchestra, Lynne did manage to release a few recordings under his own name. In 1976, Lynne covered the Beatles songs With a Little Help from My Friends, and Nowhere Man for All This and World War II. In 1977, Lynne released his first solo single, the disco-flavored Doin' That Crazy Thing / Goin' Down to Rio. Despite ELO's high profile at that time, it received little airplay and failed to chart. In 1984, Lynne and ELO keyboardist Richard Tandy contributed 2 original songs video and Let It Run to the film Electric Dreams. Lynne also wrote the song The Story of Me, which was recorded by the Everly Brothers on their comeback album EB84. Even before the official end of ELO, Lynne began his move toward focusing almost exclusively on studio production work. Lynne produced and wrote the 1983 top 40 hit Slipping Away for Dave Edmunds and played on sessions for Edmunds' album, Information. Lynne also produced 6 tracks on Edmunds' follow-up album in 1984, Riff Raff. In contrast to the dense, boomy, baroque sound of ELO, Lynne's post-ELO studio work has tended toward more minimal, acoustic instrumentation and a sparse, organic quality that generally favors light room ambience and coloration over artificial reverb, especially on vocals. Lynne's recordings also often feature the jangling compressed acoustic guitar sound pioneered by Roger McGuinn and a heavily gated snare drum sound. Lynne's influence by the Beatles was clearly evident in his ELO work, and the connection to the Beatles was strengthened when Lynne produced George Harrison's Crowd 9. The latter was a successful comeback album for Harrison, released in 1987, featuring the popular singles Got My Mind Set on You, When We Was Fab, and This Is Love, the last of which was co-written by Lynne. Lynne's association with Harrison led to the 1988 formation of the Traveling Wilburys, a studio supergroup that also included Tom Petty, Bob Dylan and Roy Orbison and resulted in 2 albums, both produced by Harrison and Lynne. In 1988 Lynne also worked on Orbison's album Mystery Girl, co-writing and producing Orbison's last major hit, You Got It, plus 2 other tracks on that album. For Rock On, the final Del Shannon album, Lynne co-wrote Walk Away, and finished off several tracks after Shannon's death. In 1989, Lynne co-produced Full Moon Fever by Tom Petty, which included the hit singles Free Fallin', I Won't Back Down, and Runnin' Down a Dream, all co-written by Lynne. This album and Traveling Wilburys Volume 1 received nominations for the Grammy Award for Best Album of the Year in 1989. The Traveling Wilburys won a Grammy for Best Rock Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocal that year. Lynne's song One Way Love was released as a single by Agnetha Faltskog and appeared on her second post-ABBA album, Eyes of a Woman. Lynne co-wrote and produced the track Let It Shine for Beach Boys founder Brian Wilson's first solo album in 1988. Lynne also contributed 3 tracks to an album by Duane Eddy and Falling in Love on Land of Dreams for Randy Newman. 1990s. In 1990, Lynne collaborated on the Wilburys follow-up Traveling Wilburys Volume 3 and shortly after that released his first solo album Armchair Theatre, with old friends George Harrison and Richard Tandy featuring the singles Every Little Thing, and Lift Me Up. The album received some positive critical attention but little commercial success. Lynne also provided the song Wild Times to the motion picture soundtrack Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves in 1991. In 1991, Lynne returned to the studio with Petty, co-writing and producing the album Into the Great Wide Open for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, which featured the singles Learning to Fly, and Into the Great Wide Open. The following year he produced Roy Orbison's posthumous album King of Hearts, featuring the single I Drove All Night. In February 1994, Lynne fulfilled a lifelong dream by working with the 3 surviving Beatles on the anthology album series. At George Harrison's request, Lynne was brought in to assist in re-evaluating John Lennon's original studio material. The songs Free as a Bird and Real Love were created by digitally processing Lennon's demos for the songs and overdubbing the 3 surviving band members to form a virtual Beatles reunion that the band had mutually eschewed during Lennon's lifetime. Lynne has also produced records for Ringo Starr and worked on Paul McCartney's Grammy-nominated album Flaming Pie. Lynne's work in the 1990s also includes production of a 1993 album for singer-songwriter Juliana Ray entitled Something Peculiar and production or songwriting contributions to albums by Roger McGuinn and Joe Cocker, songs by Aerosmith, Tom Jones, Bonnie Tyler, the film Still Crazy, Hank Marvin, Amoy and the Tandy Morgan Band. In 1996, Lynne was officially recognized by his peers when he was awarded the Ivor Novello Award for Outstanding Contributions to British Music for a second time. 2000s, following legal action to get the ELO name back from Bevan's touring group ELO Part 2 after Bevan decided to retire and sell his 50% rights of the ELO name to Lynne, Lynne released a new album in 2001 under the ELO moniker entitled Zoom. The album featured guest appearances by Ringo Starr, George Harrison and original ELO keyboardist Richard Tandy, with Lynne multi-tracking a majority of the instruments and vocals. The album received positive reviews but had no hit singles. Despite bearing little sonic relationship to the halcyon ELO days of the late 1970s, it was marketed as a return to the classic ELO sound in an attempt to connect with a loyal body of fans and jump-start a planned concert tour. While a live performance was taped at CBS Television City over 2 consecutive nights and shown on PBS, the tour itself was cancelled. Speculation remains as to the reason for the cancellation of this tour. Although often cited by fans as a reason for the tour cancellation, the events and aftermath of September 11 occurred subsequent to the official cancellation of the tour. Greg Bissonette, when asked, described it as the greatest tour I never went on. Earlier in 2001, Lynne began working with George Harrison on what would turn out to be Harrison's final album, Brainwashed. After Harrison's death from cancer on November 29, 2001, Lynne returned to the studio in 2002 to help finish the uncompleted album. Lynne was heavily involved in the memorial concert for George, held at London's Royal Albert Hall in November 2002, which also featured Wilbury member Petty. Lynne sang the lead vocal on The Inner Light, I Want to Tell You, and Give Me Love, and subsequently produced the surround sound audio mix for the Concert for George DVD, released in November 2003, which later received a Grammy. Lynne reunited in 2006 with Petty to produce the latter's third solo release, Highway Companion. ASCAP honored Lynne with a Golden Note Award during their inaugural I Create Music Expo on April 24, 2009. The presenter was Paul Williams. ASCAP's Golden Note Award is presented to songwriters, composers, and artists who have achieved extraordinary career milestones. Previous honorees include Tom Petty, Quincy Jones, Stevie Wonder, Sean Diddy Combs and Garth Brooks, to name a few. Lynne said in a Reuters article on April 23, 2009, that he has finally been working on the long-awaited follow-up to his 1990 solo debut album Armchair Theatre with a possible tentative release date of later this year. He also produced 4 tracks on Regina Spektor's fifth album Far, released June 23, 2009. 2010 A Euro-Present. In a March 2010 interview with the Daily Express newspaper, Lynne confirmed he was working on a new album with Joe Walsh and simultaneously writing a couple of albums under his own name, though he won't tell us in which musical direction he's heading. Lynne contributed a cover of Buddy Holly's Words of Love for the tribute album Listen to Me, Buddy Holly, which was released on September 6, 2011. On December 31, 2011, Brian Williams reported on NBC New Year's Eve with Carson Daly that 2012 releases will include rare new work from Jeff Lynne. In 2012, Walsh released his Analog Man album, which was produced by Lynne. Lynne's second solo album, a covers album entitled Long Wave, was released on October 8, 2012. A greatest hits collection of re-recorded ELO songs by Lynne titled Mr. Blue Sky, The Very Best of Electric Light Orchestra, was also released under the ELO moniker on the same day. Lynne implied that a new album with original material would be released during 2013. In 2012, Lynne and Tandy teamed up at Lynne's Bungalow Palace home studios to record a live set of ELO's songs. This was broadcast on TV as part of the Mr. Blue Sky documentary. On October 11, 2012, Lynne was nominated as a performer-songwriter for 2013 induction into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. On June 21, 2013, the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce announced that Lynne is to receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame sometime in 2014. Lynne and Tandy reunited again on November 12, 2013 to perform, under the name Jeff Lynne and Friends, Livin Thing, and Mr. Blue Sky at the Children in Need Rocks concert at Hammersmith Eventim Apollo, London. On February 9, 2014, Lynne performed George Harrison's Something on the Night That Changed America, a Grammy salute to the Beatles, as well as Hey Bulldog from the Yellow Submarine soundtrack while accompanying Dave Grohl, commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Beatles' performance on The Ed Sullivan Show. On March 5, 2014, Lynne received an honorary doctorate degree from Birmingham City University. He also mentioned he was working with Bryan Adams on new material. On September 14, 2014, Jeff Lynne will be playing a public concert for the first time in over 25 years as he headlines at the Radio 2 Festival in Hyde Park, London. Personal life: Lynne has been married twice. First to Rosemary in 1970 and then to Sandy Capelson in 1979, with whom he has 2 daughters, Laura and Stephanie. He has been in high-profile relationships with Rosie Vila and currently Camelia Cath, widow of Chicago guitarist Terry Cath and former wife of Kiefer Sutherland. Since selling the 15th-century Grade II-listed Walsh Hall near Meriden to UB40's Robin Campbell in 1995, Lynne has lived in Beverly Hills, California. Solo albums: Armchair Theatre, Long Wave, Producer discography, see also, The Idle Race discography, The Move discography, Electric Light Orchestra discography, Traveling Wilburys discography, Studio albums produced, Studio albums co-produced, Soundtrack albums co-produced, see also, Jeff Lynne and the Beatles, references. External links, ELO-Biz official website, Jeff Lynne Song Database, Discovery, Welcome to the Show ELO and Jeff Lynne information page.